You were an early Facebook employee. You've been critical of that company. What are your thoughts on what Twitter has announced? Facebook now says that they're going to ban President Trump throughout the remainder of his term, which is a couple of weeks. How are you thinking about this today?
I'm really of mixed emotions. Let me just tell you what I feel as an ex-employee. What I'm thinking to myself is that if I was working at Facebook today, I would be confused. And largely because I would wonder what changed from 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 24 months ago, and today. The disinformation was the same. The amount of sort of vitriol that flowed through some of the groups was the same. Their ability to organize was the same. Storm the Capitol existed before they actually stormed the Capitol. And so, unfortunately, the skeptical part of me says we optimized for short-term profitability at the sake of our democracy. And what we left in tatters was any sense that there was any sort of moral or ethical imperative that would govern decision-making at that company. And so that saddens me for the people that work there. As a business person, I think we're also slightly to blame because we've sort of, said that that's okay because we've been enamored with the short-term profitability of Facebook. So I think in a nutshell, I think Anthony is right that we are collectively a part of this problem. I don't think it's theirs of their own making. If the feedback loop to Facebook was fix this problem, otherwise we will sell your stock, they would have fixed it a long time ago. Instead, it was, you're rich, get richer, we'll support you. And this is what happened, Scott.
Roger McNamee, who I know that you know, said earlier on the network, he called what Facebook's done, and he's been a notable critic, to say the least. He called it an act of desperation, echoing your words that the kind of things that we've seen on Facebook have gone on for too long. He said Chris Sacca, who was an early Twitter investor, has been in the Shark Tank as well, and I know you know Chris too. He was more explicit in his criticism of both Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg. You've got blood on your hands, Jack and Zuck. For 4 years, you've rationalized this terror. Inciting violent treason is not a free speech exercise. If you work at those companies, it's on you too. Shut it down.
Scott, I think that we have to make a very clear distinction here. I think Twitter and Facebook are two very different products. I think the thing with Twitter is I actually think they're less to blame. And the reason is because the product is designed for everybody to be able to follow everybody else. So there is an incredible free flow of information. It does create a different problem, which is how do you construct a healthy social media diet? But that's what the problem is on Twitter. The problem on Facebook is different, which is it amplifies echo chambers on purpose and by design. And so if you're somebody who, for whatever reason, feels disenfranchised, you can find a corner of the internet where you can amplify your worst fears. And unfortunately, 90% of that activity now happens inside of Facebook. The reality is that I think we've all realized after today that Section 230 is a fig leaf, that there is no way that these companies can hide behind it, that Facebook is a publisher, that they should be held to the same account as any television station or any newspaper, and that's okay. And they should just figure out how to adapt the product and move on. The thing about today, which I think is just unfortunate, is backpedaling is just kind of spineless. Right? For example, Kelly Loeffler can't go into the floor of the Senate and all of a sudden change her mind because there was rioting and 4 deaths. That's what it took. But everything else, it didn't change the actual perspective of whether there was voter fraud or not. And so all these fig leaves, people see through them. And people know them to be fake. And so we just have to have a real come to Jesus in this country about what's really important.
Just to put a button on it before we take a quick break, you think Section 230 should be repealed?
I think Section 230 needs to change, and I think that these social media companies need to be dealt with as publishers. And I think at the front of the line is Facebook because they are algorithmically deciding. There are people inside of that company that are building these things that are amplifying the lobotomization, the intellectual cornering of people so that they cannot learn what's really happening, so that their worst fears and their worst concerns are amplified. And we need to do a better job of understanding that that diet is unhealthy. That now that you sell cigarettes that cause cancer, there needs to be labels. They need to be put behind the counter. They need to be far away from a children's reach. These things need to happen. And the equivalent version of that drives this decision-making online is Section 230. It has to change.